This week, Navy Admiral Frank Bradley briefed members of the Intelligence and Armed Services Committees on the September 2nd strike against a suspected Venezuelan drug cartel vessel, telling lawmakers there was no, quote, kill them all order from Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, contrary to claims circulating in the legacy media. Joining me now to discuss this and much more is Newsmax Chief Washington Correspondent James Rosen. James, welcome back to This Week on Capitol Hill.
Always great to be with you, Tony. Thank you.
All right, so in a moment, we're going to talk with Senator Cornyn about Admiral Bradley's testimony and whether or not this has resolved questions that Republicans had going into this week. But does it appear, from your perspective, that this briefing has put the issue to rest?
Largely, although not entirely, insofar as there remain House and Senate probes into this incident, and more broadly, the entire Caribbean campaign that the Trump administration has waged now, which I think has seen over 100 airstrikes against these suspected narco-terrorist drug trafficking boats in those waters, has occasioned a lot of concern, even on the Republican side of the aisle, about the legal justification for this campaign and whether if we are at war with these narco-terrorists, as a number of Trump administration officials have said, using that exact language, then why there should not be a congressional declaration that informs this and justifies this action. But in the case of Admiral Bradley and his testimony, first, it's important to note he backed up Secretary of War Pete Hegseth in saying that Hegseth never issued any kind of kill-em-all type order, as had been reported by the Washington Post. And moreover, Bradley offered a rationale for the controversial second strike on a particular boat on the 2nd of September, where apparently there were survivors from the first strike clinging to the boat. And it was seen by some on Capitol Hill as potentially a war crime to initiate that second strike to finish off those two survivors. Where all of that was concerned, Admiral Bradley offered a rationale stating that it was the determination of officials monitoring these strikes in real time back on the 2nd of September that those two survivors had tried to contact other elements of the narco-terrorist organization. And so therefore, that posed a continuing danger, and that would have justified this second strike that killed them. So in large measure, I think the controversy where Secretary Hegseth is concerned may have been put to rest here, but the broader concerns about the overall campaign in the Caribbean remain.
Of course, that's become more of an issue because of the concerns about what Secretary of War Hegseth may or may not have done. But I want to ask you this question, James. You're in the media, but I made reference to the legacy media. As Senator Cotton talked about at the very beginning, the clip I played, had the Department of Defense come out, or Department of War come out earlier and put out all the information, this may not have become the big issue that it was. It does appear that anything this administration does, the media wants to put the worst spin possible on it to raise questions.
Not a new phenomenon, of course, where conservative administrations are concerned, but where Senator Cotton's statement is concerned, it plunges us into what historians call the counterfactual, the entertaining parlor game of what if, and what if the administration had handled the disclosure surrounding the September 2 strikes in some different way. It's conceivable, as the senator suggests, that some of this furor might have been quelled, but nonetheless, to slightly rebut your point, Tony, about how the potential involvement of Secretary Hegseth in an alleged war crime gave this whole issue legs, I would say that we've been hearing complaints from both sides of the aisle about the legal justification of these strikes and this whole campaign in the Caribbean well before September 2. And I conducted an interview with the White House National Security Council counterterrorism advisor, the director of counterterrorism for the National Security Council, Dr. Sebastian Gorka, whom I've known for a long time, a couple of months ago about those strikes and asked about the legal justification. And in one sentence, he told me the narco-terrorist cartels have declared war on the United States. They have killed about 110,000 people a year, which is a lot more than the collective casualties of all of America's armed conflicts from 1945 onward, he said, and therefore we have declared war on them. And a minute later, when I said to him, you've made it clear that the U.S. now sees itself as being on a war footing with these cartels, he interrupted me and said, no, I only said that they had declared war on us. I didn't have a court stenographer at the ready at that moment to read back the record of our conversation from a minute earlier, but he had said, we are declaring war on them. Secretary Hegseth, in his defense of himself, said that the boat was on fire on September 2. This is called the fog of war.
Right.
So administration officials are using the language of war, the specific explicit reference to war, but they're not going through the Congress to declare war. And I think that's causing agita on both sides.
Fair enough. You are correct in that. I was actually speaking to a group of senators off the record meeting last month, and it was this was not the topic I was speaking to them about, but it came up, and there was concern among Republican senators that they had not received enough information at that point regarding these strikes against these boats. They were looking for the classified information. So I do. You're right. There are questions that are out there. I do think, though, that it was elevated because of the Washington Post article claiming that the Secretary of War said "kill them all." And of course, we'll see. We'll see what happens. I mean, they're not the first to use the military. They're the first to use the military in direct strikes. The military's been involved in the war on drugs in the past, but mostly in supportive roles. So this is a first.
Well, and let's be clear, no Americans out there, especially as we approach the midterms, none of them are going to shed a tear for some narco traffickers who are bringing fentanyl to the shores of the United States. The administration maintains, and I've heard Dr. Gorka say, that the intelligence on these boats and the personnel on these boats is ironclad, that they know not only who they are and what they do, but their mother's maiden name and so forth. And at some point, I think it does behoove the administration to bring some more granular detail to that intelligence, of course, while respecting sources and methods, so as to put to bed some of these concerns about the validity of the entire action, which seems to be getting bigger as we go along. We've got a lot of military assets, naval ships and so forth deployed to the Caribbean, and our alliances are being strained in some respects because of it. I've heard that Venezuela is taking very punitive action, for example, against Trinidad, because that tiny island is allowing U.S. ships to base there. Right. So this campaign isn't going to get smaller as the days go on. President Trump himself is talking about land strikes. It's not clear what the end game is, whether it requires the overthrow of Nicolas Maduro. But nonetheless, questions are going to grow as the entire campaign.
As they should. We have 30 seconds left, but this is setting precedent. Anytime precedent is set, we know that it's going to be utilized in the future. So now is the time to ask the questions.
That's right. And President Trump, of course, this is just one area in which he has sought to restore what he sees as the proper balance between the branches and the proper prerogatives of the presidency, not just in war making, but in budgeting and a whole range of areas. And future presidents will benefit from it.
For full shows, live and on demand, it's Salem News Channel.